du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes.
In the annals of history, few figures evoke as much intrigue and revulsion as Adolf Hitler. Known predominantly for his tyrannical reign and the unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust, there lies beneath the surface a lesser explored aspect of his life, his wealth, and those who ended up acquiring it. Let us delve into his life story, spanning from obscurity to opulence, and the subsequent legal wrangling over his estate offers a unique lens through which to view the life of one of history's most notorious figures. It is a tale that intertwines the personal with the political, the private wealth with the public calamity, providing a nuanced perspective on the complex legacy of Adolf Hitler. The ascent of Adolf Hitler from a life marred by early failures and financial instability to the zenith of political power and personal wealth is a narrative steeped in both historical significance and moral complexity. Born into modest circumstances in Braunau am Inn, a small town on the Austro-German border, Hitler's early life was far removed from the opulence he would later come to know. His father, a customs official, and his mother, a homemaker, provided a stable yet unremarkable upbringing. However, the death of his father in 1903 and his mother in 1907 plunged Hitler into a period of profound uncertainty and hardship. In his youth, Hitler harbored ambitions of becoming an artist, a dream that led him to Vienna, the cultural heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Yet, his aspirations were met with consecutive rejections from the Academy of Fine Arts Vienna, citing a lack of talent. These setbacks, coupled with the eventual depletion of his modest inheritance, relegated Hitler to a life of penury. He eked out a living by painting postcards and advertisements, often finding himself on the brink of homelessness. This period of struggle, however, was not merely a phase of personal adversity, but a crucible that forged Hitler's early ideological convictions and his deep-seated resentment towards certain societal groups, which he would later exploit for both political gain and personal enrichment. The narrative of his rise from destitution would become a powerful tool in his political arsenal, resonating with a populace beleaguered by the economic turmoil of post-World War I Germany. The turning point in Hitler's financial fortunes came with the publication of Mein Kampf, My Struggle, a manifesto-cum-autobiography that he penned during his imprisonment following the failed beer hall putsch of 1923. Initially, the book's reception was lukewarm, but as Hitler's political star rose, so too did the book's popularity. By the time he ascended to the chancellorship in 1933, Mein Kampf had become a staple of German households, a mandatory gift for newlywed couples, and a significant source of income for Hitler, reportedly earning him the equivalent of millions of dollars in today's currency. Beyond the royalties from his book, Hitler's wealth was augmented by a confluence of other factors. His position as the Führer granted him unfettered access to the state's resources, and his influence attracted substantial donations from wealthy industrialists and supporters, both domestic and international. These contributions, often made in the shadows, helped finance the Nazi Party's activities and, by extension, Hitler's personal projects and lifestyle. As Hitler's power solidified, so did his financial empire, built on the pillars of propaganda, political manipulation, and the unscrupulous exploitation of a nation's resources. His journey from the depths of poverty to the pinnacle of wealth and power is a stark illustration of how the intertwining of political ambition and personal enrichment can have profound and far-reaching consequences. At the zenith of his power, Adolf Hitler's wealth was not merely a reflection of his personal affluence, but a testament to the absolute control he wielded over the German state and its resources. His financial empire, built on the back of his rise to the Führer of the Third Reich, was vast and varied, encompassing not only liquid assets but also properties, art, and treasures plundered during the expansive military campaigns of the Nazi regime. The new Reich Chancellery in Berlin, a symbol of Hitler's grandiose vision for the Third Reich, stood as a testament to the limitless resources at his disposal. Commissioned by Hitler and designed by his favored architect, Albert Speer, the Chancellery was constructed with a no-expense-spared mandate, embodying the opulence and the architectural megalomania that characterized Nazi Germany's public edifices. This was but one of the many residences that Hitler owned or had access to, including the Berghof, his alpine retreat in Bavaria, and the Eagle's Nest, a tea house atop the Kelstein Mountain given to him as a gift for his 50th birthday. Beyond the tangible symbols of his wealth, Hitler's financial portfolio was bolstered by the royalties from Mein Kampf, which continued to swell his coffers significantly. The book's ubiquity in German households, coupled with its mandatory presence at state functions like weddings, ensured a steady stream of income. This income was further augmented by the royalties from his image and propaganda materials, including his portraits, which were omnipresent across the Reich. However, the true extent of Hitler's wealth was not limited to his personal earnings or properties. The Nazi regime's aggressive expansion across Europe was accompanied by systematic plundering of art, gold, and other valuables from the occupied territories. This loot, often funneled back to the German state, was at Hitler's disposal, blurring the lines between the state's wealth and his personal fortune. The Reichsbank, the central bank of Germany, became the repository for much of this plundered wealth, including the infamous Nazi gold, which comprised gold reserves taken from the central banks of occupied countries and gold items seized from the victims of the Holocaust. The financial mechanisms of the Third Reich were intricately tied to Hitler's personal wealth. His control over the German economy and treasury was absolute, allowing him to dictate financial policies that further enriched him and his inner circle. Tax exemptions and laws were manipulated to his benefit, ensuring that his wealth remained untaxed and his financial dealings largely unscrutinized. At the peak of his power, Hitler's wealth was not just a personal fortune, but a symbol of the total conflation of state and individual interests under his dictatorship. The vast resources at his command were not only a measure of his personal wealth, but also an indicator of the profound and perverse impact of his rule on Germany and the territories it occupied. The scale of his wealth was a stark reminder of the extent to which he had subverted the mechanisms of the state to serve his ambitions, leaving an indelible mark on history. The wealth amassed by Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime was not solely the product of political donations, royalties, and state control, but also the result of one of the most systematic and extensive campaigns of cultural plunder in history. As the Nazi war machine expanded its reach across Europe, it left in its wake a trail of looted art, gold, and cultural treasures, which became integral to Hitler's vast fortune and the Third Reich's war chest. The Nazis' looting began with the state-sanctioned Aryanization policies within Germany, where Jewish-owned businesses and properties were forcibly seized. This campaign of dispossession extended to the art world, where works owned by Jewish collectors were confiscated or forcibly sold at a fraction of their value. Hitler, an aspiring artist in his youth, had a particular interest in art and envisioned the establishment of a grand museum in Linz, his hometown, to house the greatest art treasures of Europe. This vision fueled the systematic looting of art from museums, galleries, and private collections across the occupied territories. The Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, ERR, a special task force, was established to oversee the looting of cultural property. The ERR, along with other Nazi units, was responsible for the theft of hundreds of thousands of art pieces, including works by renowned artists such as Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Vermeer, and Rembrandt. These works were either added to Hitler's personal collection, earmarked for the Führer Museum in Linz, or used to finance the Nazi war effort through sales in the international art market. In addition to art, the Nazis plundered vast quantities of gold from the central banks of occupied countries, personal belongings of Holocaust victims, and religious treasures. This stolen wealth was systematically melted down and deposited in the Reichsbank, further enriching Hitler's regime. The value of this plundered gold and other assets contributed significantly to the Nazi economy, underwriting the war effort and bolstering Hitler's personal wealth. The scale and efficiency of the Nazi plunder operation were unprecedented, involving a complex network of officials, soldiers, and collaborators across Europe. The looting was not just a byproduct of the war, but a well-organized, state-directed effort that was integral to the Nazi strategy, reflecting the regime's total disregard for cultural heritage and human rights. The aftermath of the war saw the Allies undertaking extensive efforts to recover and repatriate the stolen art and cultural property, a process that continues to this day. The story of Nazi plunder is a dark chapter in the history of art and culture, highlighting the extent to which Hitler's regime sought to enrich itself and reshape cultural heritage in its image. The wealth accumulated through these acts of theft and desecration added another layer to Hitler's fortune, casting a long shadow over the art world and the countless lives affected by the Nazis' rapacious policies. In the waning days of the Third Reich, with the Allies closing in on Berlin, Adolf Hitler penned his last will and testament, a document that provides a revealing glimpse into his final thoughts on his legacy, wealth, and the disposition of his assets. Dictated on April 29, 1945, just a day before his Hitler's will, was a testament to the delusions and desperation of a dictator facing imminent defeat, yet still concerned with the fate of his accumulated wealth and possessions. In his will, Hitler made clear his desire for his assets to benefit the Nazi Party, or in the absence of the party's existence, the German state. This directive reflected his lifelong conflation of personal interests with those of the state and the party he led. He declared, "What I own, as far as it is worth anything, belongs to the party. Should the party no longer exist, it will belong to the state." This statement underscored the extent to which Hitler's identity and fortune were intertwined with the fate of the Nazi regime. Furthermore, Hitler's will addressed his art collection, which he insisted was amassed not for personal enjoyment, but for the establishment of a gallery in his hometown of Linz. This claim highlights Hitler's obsession with art and his ambition to leave a cultural legacy that aligned with his distorted vision for the Third Reich. The will also made provisions for his closest associates and family members, allocating personal mementos and modest assets, a gesture that seemed almost incongruous with the vast scale of wealth and power he had wielded. The document also served as a final platform for Hitler to express his unrepentant ideology and to appoint his successors, with Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz named as President of the Reich and Joseph Goebbels as Chancellor. However, the testament's directives regarding Hitler's wealth and assets were largely symbolic, given the chaotic state of the Reich in its final days and the comprehensive defeat that awaited it. After Hitler's death, the will was discovered and became a subject of intense interest to the Allies. It was used as evidence in the Nuremberg trials to illustrate the continuity of Nazi leadership and the central role Hitler played in the regime's actions. However, the practical implications of the will regarding Hitler's assets were minimal. The collapse of the Nazi regime and the division of Germany into occupied zones meant that Hitler's wishes for his estate were largely ignored. The Allied powers, focused on denazification and the reconstruction of Europe, had little interest in honoring the final wishes of a dictator responsible for untold suffering and destruction. Hitler's last will and testament stands as a historical artifact that sheds light on the mindset of a dictator in his final hours. It reflects the intertwining of personal, political, and ideological elements that defined Hitler's life and rule, offering a window into the priorities and delusions that persisted even as his empire crumbled around him. The aftermath of Adolf Hitler's demise set the stage for a complex and protracted legal battle over his estate, a saga that unfolded against the backdrop of a world seeking to recover from the devastation of World War II. Despite Hitler's explicit directives in his last will and testament, the disposition of his assets became a contentious issue, entangling family members, the newly established German government, and the Allied powers in a legal and moral quagmire. At the heart of the dispute was the question of who, if anyone, was entitled to inherit Hitler's wealth, which included not only his personal assets and royalties from Mein Kampf, but also the value of art, property, and other items accumulated during his reign. Hitler's will had named his secretary, Martin Bormann, as the executor, and made provisions for his closest associates and relatives, including his sister, Paula Hitler. However, the chaotic end of the Nazi regime and the lack of a clear legal framework for dealing with the assets of a dictator who had led his country into a catastrophic war complicated the execution of the will. Paula Hitler, living in relative obscurity, emerged as a central figure in the battle for Hitler's inheritance. She sought to claim her brother's estate, arguing that as his closest living relative, she was entitled to his assets. However, her efforts were hampered by the absence of a death certificate for Hitler and the legal void left by the collapse of the Nazi legal system. The German courts, now operating under the oversight of the Allied occupation authorities, were reluctant to recognize claims related to the estate of a man responsible for some of the most heinous crimes in history. The situation was further complicated by the fact that much of Hitler's wealth was intertwined with the assets of the Nazi Party and the German state, making it difficult to distinguish between personal and state property. The Allied powers, particularly the United States and the Soviet Union, were more concerned with denazification and dismantling the remnants of the Nazi regime than with adjudicating inheritance claims. In the end, the majority of Hitler's assets were either seized by the Allied powers or reverted to the German state, which was in the process of being reconstituted. The state of Bavaria, where Hitler had been a registered resident, took control of his properties within its jurisdiction, including the Berghof and other real estate. The royalties from Mein Kampf and other intellectual property rights became a matter of state control, with the publication of the book being heavily restricted in Germany and many other countries. The battle for Hitler's inheritance highlighted the unique challenges of dealing with the estate of a dictator who had used his power to amass personal wealth through the exploitation of an entire nation and the commission of war crimes. It served as a cautionary tale about the complexities of justice and restitution in the aftermath of tyranny, raising questions about the rights of individuals to inherit wealth that was accumulated at the expense of millions of victims. The posthumous journey of Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf is a saga that intertwines legal, ethical, and historical threads, reflecting the complexities of dealing with the legacy of one of history's most notorious figures. Following Hitler's death and the fall of the Third Reich, the ownership and rights to Mein Kampf became a contentious issue, emblematic of the broader challenges of denazification and the moral reckoning with the Nazi era. Mein Kampf, written by Hitler during his imprisonment in 1924, had been a significant source of income for him, contributing to his personal wealth through the sale of millions of copies. The book, which outlined Hitler's ideological blueprint for the Nazi regime, was distributed widely throughout Germany, with a copy given to newlyweds and soldiers as part of the regime's propaganda efforts. However, the end of World War II and Hitler's death left the future of the book and its proceeds in limbo. The state of Bavaria, where Hitler was a registered resident at the time of his death, assumed control over the copyright of Mein Kampf. The Bavarian government, grappling with the ethical implications of profiting from Hitler's work, imposed strict restrictions on the publication and distribution of the book within Germany. For decades, Mein Kampf was not reprinted in Germany, and its distribution was heavily regulated, reflecting a societal consensus to prevent the spread of Nazi ideology. The debate over Mein Kampf extended beyond Germany's borders, with various countries adopting their own policies regarding the book. In some places, it was banned outright, while in others, it was available for academic and research purposes, underscoring the global struggle to balance the imperatives of historical scholarship, free expression, and the prevention of hate speech. The copyright on Mein Kampf expired at the end of 2015, 70 years after Hitler's death, leading to renewed debate over how to handle the text. The expiration opened the door for new editions, including critical versions annotated by historians, aimed at providing context and countering the original text's propaganda. These editions sought to demystify the book and use it as a tool for education about the dangers of totalitarianism and hate. The handling of Mein Kampf post-1945 illustrates the enduring challenges posed by the Nazi legacy. The decisions made by the Bavarian government and others reflect a cautious approach to a work that, while historically significant, remains a potent symbol of hate. The evolution of the book's status from a bestseller in Nazi Germany to a tightly controlled text in the post-war era, and eventually to a document of historical interest, underscores the ongoing efforts to confront and understand the darkest chapters of the 20th century, ensuring that the lessons of history are not forgotten. The legacy of Adolf Hitler's wealth, amassed through a combination of royalties, state appropriations, and systematic plunder during the Third Reich, continues to provoke debate and reflection long after the fall of Nazi Germany. The disposition of his assets and the ongoing discussions around them serve as a stark reminder of the intertwining of economic gain with the machinery of war and genocide, raising profound questions about restitution, memory, and justice. In the aftermath of World War II, the Allies faced the monumental task of addressing the injustices perpetrated by the Nazi regime, including the restitution of stolen property and assets. The process of returning looted art, gold, and other valuables to their rightful owners or their descendants has been fraught with legal and ethical challenges, complicated by the passage of time and the often incomplete documentation of ownership. The story of Hitler's wealth is emblematic of these broader issues, highlighting the difficulties in untangling the personal fortune of a dictator from the wider economic crimes of the regime he led. The debate over Hitler's wealth also touches on the sensitive issue of how modern Germany confronts its past. The management of assets associated with Hitler, including the royalties from Mein Kampf and the fate of properties like the Berghof, reflects a careful balancing act. On one hand, there is a desire to ensure that these assets are not used to glorify the Nazi era or to profit from its crimes. On the other hand, there is an acknowledgement that these assets are part of history and, as such, can play a role in education and remembrance. The ethical considerations surrounding Hitler's wealth extend to the broader question of how societies deal with the legacies of oppressive regimes. The case of Hitler's inheritance is not unique. Throughout history, the fall of tyrannical leaders has often left behind complex legal and moral dilemmas regarding their assets. The handling of these cases reflects broader societal values and the ongoing struggle to make amends for historical injustices. Moreover, the legacy of Hitler's wealth serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of allowing unchecked power to accumulate economic as well as political capital. The ease with which Hitler was able to amass a personal fortune through the mechanisms of the state underscores the importance of transparency, accountability, and the rule of law in preventing the abuse of power. As the world continues to grapple with the remnants of Hitler's wealth, these assets and the debates they spark serve as a reminder of the need to vigilantly guard against the repeat of history's darkest chapters. They underscore the importance of remembering the past, not only to honor the victims of the Nazi regime, but also to ensure that future generations learn from the mistakes of history. fostering a world where justice and human rights are upheld. As we conclude this exploration into the enigmatic and dark legacy of Adolf Hitler's wealth, we are reminded of the profound complexities and moral quandaries that arise from the intertwining of power, war, and economic gain. The narrative of Hitler's amassed fortune, from its origins in the royalties of a propagandist manifesto to the ill-gotten gains of a world at war, serves as a stark testament to the depths to which humanity can sink in the pursuit of ideological fanaticism and absolute control. The saga of Hitler's wealth, encompassing everything from the royalties of Mein Kampf to the vast treasures plundered across Europe, is not merely a historical footnote. It is a narrative imbued with lessons on the corrosive effects of unchecked power and the importance of vigilance in the face of tyranny. The legal battles, ethical debates, and ongoing efforts at restitution that have followed in the wake of Hitler's death underscore the enduring impact of the Nazi regime's crimes and the complex legacy they have left behind. This journey through the accumulation, management, and aftermath of Hitler's wealth challenges us to reflect on broader themes of justice, memory, and responsibility. It compels us to consider how societies can navigate the delicate process of remembering the past, not as a means of glorification, but as a solemn duty to those who suffered, and as a crucial lesson for future generations. The story of Hitler's wealth serves as a reminder of the need for transparency, accountability, and the rule of law in preventing the concentration of power that can lead to such catastrophic consequences. In grappling with the legacy of Hitler's wealth, we are confronted with the ongoing task of ensuring that history's darkest chapters are neither forgotten nor repeated. It is a task that demands a commitment to education, to the preservation of memory, and to the relentless pursuit of justice. As we move forward, let the story of Hitler's wealth be a beacon, guiding our efforts to build a world that learns from the past, cherishes human dignity, and steadfastly guards against the return of such darkness. That's it for this video. See you next time.